my name is Cassie Jongejan. I'm a Bastyr University graduate from the Nutrition and Exercise Science program. Today we'll be talking about microbes, genetically modified organisms, and how the two relate to our health. I'm obsessed with microbes. I love fermentation, and Sandor Katz is one of my heroes. Sandor has written a wonderful book called The Art of Fermentation, where microbes and the little cultures that and communities that they make together are spoken about, and they're in relation to their health for our bodies and in relation to the health of their communities. So Sandor talks about supporting our own microbiome with microbes and fermentation that you can do at home. And he also speaks about how these microbes help our own biome. So that's one of my obsessions, and I also love food. Food is amazing and keeps us going every day. It's every time we eat, it's a choice to live. And I choose to live not only because I love the taste of good quality food, but because I love the way it makes me feel. And through the art of fermentation and experimenting with all these different fermentations, I've seen how my body reacts to different foods. And just through self-experimentation, I have developed a passion for good, honest eating, and that includes healthy bacteria. We humans, Earth's microscopic inhabitants, are no different than microbes, are not so different than microbes. Our bodies harbor different but very important ecological niches for its micro-inhabitants. In order to keep our bodies thriving, we rely on complex rhythms we may take for granted, like eating and breathing, processes which are contingent upon microbes. It is evident that these small organisms are vital to our daily functioning. With all the lethal antimicrobial agents out there, could we be safeguarding ourselves to the point of poor health? What kind of impact has conventional food and agriculture had on these important co-inhabitants? Could GMOs create pathogenic overgrowth? And what exactly are microbes anyway? These are the questions that will be addressed in the following presentation, Living with Microbes. Culture is cultivation, but it is not an isolated act. It is by definition part of the cyclical, ongoing process, passed from generation to generation. We use this word, culture, to describe the practice of all that human beings hope to perpetuate in our varied and overlapping existences. This same word, culture, is used to define a community of microbes. Like any other culture, microbial cultures must be supported in order to survive. In order to create a culturally friendly environment, we must understand that pathogens can stem from the destruction and manipulation of biodiversity. We've heard microbes mentioned throughout the worst of times. A cold here, an infection there, or perhaps something drastic like strep throat. These encounters carry over to our garden beds when we hear of tomato blight or a root fungus. In the usual scenario, we end up blaming some random virus or bacteria and are prescribed a round of antibiotics. Or in the fields, we spray our soils with pesticides, and that's that. Microbes are single-cell organisms. Together, they make up the oldest forms of life on Earth. It may be hard to believe that the descendants of Earth's first inhabitants are still alive and well today. Even more surprising is the sheer number of microbes that exist. In the human body alone, there's an estimated 100 trillion microbial inhabitants. Considering these organisms have been around for billions of years, we are relatively a new home for them. Microbes exist on most of our planet's surfaces, including places where we once thought nothing could survive. From frozen ice in the Arctic to the boiling waters of hot springs, microbes are everywhere. What makes these organisms able to live in such drastically different climates? They continually monitor their external and internal environments and are readily able to adapt to any changes. Bacteria have multiple systems for accessing DNA. In contrast with our eukaryotic cells, with fixed genetic material, prokaryotic bacteria have free-floating genes, which they frequently exchange. Genes are carried by a bacterium only when needed, as a human may carry sophisticated tools. What is a eukaryotic cell? A eukaryotic cell is the cell that all animals, plants, and humans are made of. It has a membrane that encases everything and protects it, keeping things out and keeping things in. And then it also has other small organelles, and the important distinguishing characteristic is in the center is a nucleus, and in that nucleus is all of our DNA. So, eukaryotic cells, each individual cell, is carrying around our unique DNA, half of which is given to us by our mother, half by our father, and together they create this beautiful helix that is DNA. So a prokaryote is a bacteria, it's a microbial species, is a single cell. So it doesn't actually contain any of the organelles that eukaryotes have, which interestingly enough is why people theorize that bacteria are the reason why we're alive today, because those organelles in eukaryotic cells are estimated to have come from prokaryotes emerging to create a eukaryotic cell. It's pretty amazing. So the prokaryotic cells are a lot more simple, and their genes are not fixed like the eukaryotics, and it just gives them a lot more leeway. They can adapt. It's like a child's game on the playground where the bark is lava and some kid falls and everyone's like, oh no, but he jumps up and says, I just happened to acquire lava-proof boots. That's a prokaryote. It's like, oh, now I need this gene. Thank you. And now I don't. From an evolutionary perspective, microbes seem somewhat invincible. A small number of microbes get all the attention, like E. coli, Streptococcus, and Candida albicans, just to name a few. Unfortunately, because a small number of microbes cause disease, all microbes have a bad rep. Considering our relatively fixed genome, microbes could certainly be perceived as threatening. We just don't often hear about all the good things they do for us every day. Allow me to indulge you. The trillions of microbes living inside each of us are in no way a defect. In fact, some may call them our co-evolutionary partners. Like me. Microbes play essential roles in breaking down nutrients, energy balance, gene expression, and immune response. Our indigenous microbiota are passed down, somewhat like an heirloom, from mother to offspring through the birth canal. Indigenous or not, microbes occupy all of our surfaces. The majority of these tiny partners settle down in the ecological niches of our intestines, protecting us from invading pathogens by outcompeting them in both space and food. The more healthy indigenous microbial species we carry, the less chance a pathogenic microbe can take over. In a report published in Science on the 1st of April 2011, Elizabeth Peninsey describes the relationship of obesity and microbes. Almost 1/3 of the obese study participants had 30 to 40% fewer microbial genes than their lean counterparts. According to the 2009-2010 CDC report, 69.2% of adults over the age of 20 in Canada and the US are overweight or obese. Could missing microbes be to blame? In more microbial research published in Nature on the 29th of May, 3 teams of researchers illustrate that patients with type 2 diabetes have an altered gut microbiota. By examining a total of 145 women, Frederick Backhead said, "We could predict which patients are at risk for developing diabetes. In fact, this model has a better predictive value than the classical predictive markers used today, such as body mass index and waist to hip ratio." So why is our microbiome out of whack? The biggest single problem with microbes today is the warring mentality. Warring with microbes is like being at war with ourselves. Unfortunately, pathogenic bacteria are very resilient, and indigenous bacteria are only good at warding off pathogens if they are present to compete. As we continue to kill good bacteria with incessant use of antibacterial soaps, pasteurization, antibiotics, pesticides, and fungicides, all designed to protect us, the healthy microbial biodiversity within our bodies is suffering more than ever. Recent analyses indicate that conventional food and agricultural practices may be influencing the current state of our gut. Research published from UCLA on the 28th of May indicates that regularly consuming beneficial bacteria appears to alter brain function. Most of the natural forms of probiotics found in foods we eat today are either pasteurized or dosed with chemicals designed to wipe out all microbial life. When you use an herbicide or a fungicide, that side part means to kill. Each application kills both bad and good bacteria. Roundup was introduced in the 1970s and continues to be the most often used herbicide in the United States. Some estimate that more than 200 million pounds are applied annually in the US. Glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, kills pretty much any green growing thing unless it's specifically resistant to it, either by design, Roundup Ready or genetically modified crops, or by newly evolving superweeds. The use of this chemical causes shifts of different microbial species in the soil. Some may be suppressed, while less desirable populations may benefit. The biotech industry asserts that glyphosate is lowly toxic to humans and animals. However, in a recent review published in the journal Entropy on the 10th of April, Samsel and CNF disclosed glyphosate's alarming impact on the specific enzyme P450. This enzyme helps detox the body of damaging chemical and environmental toxins. According to their review, glyphosate's inhibition of this enzyme is instrumental with most of the diseases and conditions associated with a Western diet. With disruption of the biosynthesis of aromatic amino acids by gut bacteria, as well as impairment in serum sulfate transport. Negative impact on the body is insidious, manifests slowly over time as inflammation damages cellular systems throughout the body. Although the pathway glyphosate inhibits is not present in animals or humans, it is present in gut-dwelling microbes. Ironically, glyphosate is patented as an antibiotic to kill off digestive organisms. Despite the surmounting evidence of the important roles microbes serve in managing health, the industry insists that glyphosate is harmless to humans. Meanwhile, our co-evolutionary partners are shifting in both numbers and diversity. highly pathogenic strains of Salmonella and Clostridium were found to be highly resistant to glyphosate, whereas beneficial bacteria such as Enterococcus, Bacillus, and Lactobacillus were found to be especially susceptible. Yet many in the field caution that it remains difficult to determine whether changes in gut microbes drive or to contribute to health problems or whether the poor health itself triggers those changes. Roundup is closely tied to the invention of genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. The first GMO crops were genetically engineered specifically for Roundup resistance. This allowed farmers to douse their entire fields with this herbicide without killing off their crops. Since then, others have manifested. For those that don't know, genetically engineering refers to the specific technique created by the biotech industry. A GMO is an organism whose genome has been directly manipulated by a laboratory process where genes from the DNA of one species are extracted and artificially forced into the genes of an unrelated plant or animal. Foreign genes may come from bacteria, viruses, insects, animals, or even humans. Genetic engineering is a complex process. Scientists in the UK reveal that the process of genetic engineering results in widespread mutations within the inserted gene, near its insertion, and in hundreds of thousands of locations throughout the genome. You may recall that microbes can easily transfer genes to other microbes. This is called horizontal gene transfer, where spliced-in genes leap to other species. Some are concerned that once GMOs are introduced into the wild, there's no way to stop genetically modified organisms from spreading to non-genetically modified organisms, thus contaminating wild species. Microbes are often the vehicles to which genetic engineering is possible. Many of these microbes have been engineered with pesticides. Remember that "side" means kill, meaning that eating these GMO foods inherently contain microbial killers not just topically, but in the foods themselves. GMOs were introduced into the food supply in the 1990s. Many GMO crops are actually subsidized. These artificially low prices have helped food manufacturers cut the cost of food. Currently, commercialized GM crops in the U.S. include soy, cotton, canola, sugar beets, corn, Hawaiian papaya, and zucchini and yellow squash. These foods make their way into the majority of processed foods in the U.S. Once present in an environment, whether that is your soil or your stomach, a microbe with fabricated DNA sequences may be able to form new viruses, retroviruses, or even pesticides, the consequences of which are unknown. Which is precisely why 65 countries around the globe, including the entire European Union, China, Japan, and Korea, have all banned GMOs. It is evident that microbes are vital to our daily functioning. If our bodies are our most important assets, we must stop persecuting the very partners that maintain it. For the last 40 years, DNA has been disgraced to the status of a lab rat, and microbes to alleged villains. Meanwhile, our co-evolutionary partners are shifting in both numbers and diversity. The choice is ours. Do we continue to practice agriculture under the unsustainable methods currently in place, dousing monoculture upon monoculture with synthetic chemicals, all while potentially damaging the microbial cultures in our soils, and in our stomachs? Do we continue to consume foods with foreign DNA our bodies may not even recognize as food, creating the framework for superbugs and who knows what else? Or is it time to team up with microbes and restore the many ecological niches that we both call home? Working with nature and not against it. Standing up for responsible technology, for the people, for the planet, so our children can continue living with microbes. Right. Okay. So the question is, what are the alternatives to synthetic chemicals for farming? To answer that, I'd have to say working with microbes, teaming up, as I said, is actually what we need to be considering, because all chemistry is created by microbiology. Funguses and bacteria create nitrogen and phosphorus and all the chemicals that are required for a plant to grow. And they live in these little communities right at the root of a plant. So they live and work with this plant in this little system that they've created. The plant provides the microbes with nutrients, sucking it down out through their roots, and the funguses and bacteria and other microbes provide the plant with the chemicals that they need to grow. And the entire soil biology is interrupted when we douse our fields with these fungicides, with any of the sides, or with any of the synthetic fertilizers. We're completely disrupting the soil biology, so the plants and the microbes and all the other creatures that work together, that system is broken. And then our fields get more and more desertified and inert, and we're wondering why. But microbes are the answer to many questions. People really don't take into consideration how traditional cuisines used to be completely dependent on fermentation. This is why we have evolved. This is why we're here today. Fermentation, the reason why humans exist. I shouldn't say it that plainly because it's so exact, it's so indefinite, but it's true. They are our co-evolutionary partners for a reason. Humans and animals cannot survive without microbes. Microbes, on the other hand, will be just fine without us. And what people don't understand is the pasteurization completely kills microbes. So anytime you're eating a pasteurized food, which is most processed foods, it's devoid of life. That is the definition for a safe pasteurized product. Devoid of life, microbial life, zero. And all of these foods that we used to be eating filled with all of these microbes is what has supported our guts for so long. Now that we're not eating them, because of pesticides, because of pasteurization, where else are we going to get them? So now people have to consciously look out and seek and make their own fermentations like people used to do, which is not a bad thing. I think it's great that people are starting to get back into these traditional cuisines. These are what supports our bodies. These are what supports our microbial inhabitants, and that's what's going to support your inhabiting your own body. The question was, can I expand on some of the crops or species that have been contaminated by GMOs already? Because corn and other species of crops are pollinated by wind, it's very difficult for people to contain an entire crop because they're not really in control. Nature is in control. I'm sorry, we can't control the wind. So wind will fly and pollinate non-GMO crops from GMO crops. So this has happened in corn, and it's completely devastated a lot of the heirloom crops that have been thousands of years of breeding for people. What is an enzyme? An enzyme is the catalyst for a lot of our internal processes. it's a protein, to activate a process that otherwise would not be able to take place. So things like vitamin B can be methylated or demethylated, which simply means that an oxygen and a hydrogen molecule are added to it by the enzyme or taken off of it, and that will activate or inactivate. There are other, elements that can be added for the same overarching theme, but that's what an enzyme does. It will turn on the process or turn off the process. It's very important in all of our cellular reactions. Without enzymes, work wouldn't be done. So that's what creates our sacred story that is our DNA. Our unique story that can only be said from one mother and one father, creating a sacred, unique structure that is you and me. And the possibility of horizontal transfer damaging that structure is what is so scary. And without being emotional about it, it's just we don't know what could happen. So it shouldn't be taken lightly. It should be a choice, at least, up to the individual.
So what you're telling me, for people like me who are real concerned that my grandchildren will not see their grandchildren,
Right.
that if the human race does get decimated,
Mm-hmm.
the microbes may build us all back up again.
They really can.
Okay.
It's really beautiful. Evolution,
Uh-huh.
and for us to have this high and mighty stance that we can create life,
Mm-hmm.
we are not God. And we need to have some dignity and some humility in accepting that.